Good intentions, good intentions. What a strange and goofy name for a podcast. Doesn't this guy know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions? Doesn't this guy know by their fruits you will know them, right? It is the outcomes that we seek, not the intentions. And intentions are not really knowable anyway, right? You don't know what somebody had in their heart when you deal with them. We want to know about outcomes. These are concerns, right? I am Dave. I'm Dave. This is the Good Intentions Podcast. It's also a YouTube channel. This is going to be a place where I'm going to have unscripted conversations with people. I am inspired by the Joe Rogan experience. I think that guy's doing amazing things with having free-form conversations. I am a podcaster. I've been doing a podcast for and by software developers for quite a while, with a bit of scripted is not the right word, but with a format that has some rigor, some parameters to it. It's not completely unscripted like what I see with the likes of Joe Rogan, where he's just sitting down and having conversations. Well, I want to do that. I want to have some conversations with people. Now, I have opinions, right? I have kept them to myself largely, mostly out of fear. I have unpopular opinions, and I think I'm going to share things on this podcast, on this YouTube channel, that are going to be, well, unpopular, that are going to be perhaps offensive. People have differing opinions, right? I think there's something going on in the world. There's something going on, especially in the United States of America, where I live. I live in Denver, Colorado, in the United States of America. There is something ugly in the air, right? The 2016 presidential elections in the U.S., I'm not so much concerned about the personalities of the people that were running as the reactions that they caused, right? The division, the vitriol, if you vote for the person who's not the person that I'm voting for, you can't be my friend anymore. The division that we have, right? So back to this idea of good intentions, right? Yes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and every atrocity, well, I don't know that that's true, but I have a theory, a suspicion, a belief that all humans have good intentions. I think even every atrocity was committed with good intentions. And so, emphasizing good intentions, well, there's a mixed message there, right? I'm not saying that all acts that are done with good intentions are to the good. So yes, I agree. By their fruits, you will know them. By what they produce, sure, yeah, right? If I don't actually end up producing something good with this podcast, well, then it's not necessarily a net good to humanity. But I think there's something bigger at work here. So I'm going to try to formulate something. Oh, and by the way, this episode 0 that is describing this podcast, trying to say what it is it's unscripted too, right? So I'm just riffing off the cuff here, trying to share what are my thoughts and why I'm trying to create this. So the form that this podcast is going to take is that it's going to be me with other human beings having conversations. Unlike the Joe Rogan experience, they are not going to be in-person conversations. Well, at least for now, right? Most of them will be via Google Hangouts or something of the sort, where we're having a video chat. There will be video and audio. I'm going to try to make sure that it's not geared toward video, so that they are consumable as in the audio form. I am a voracious podcast consumer and a podcast producer, and it matters to me that audio content is consumable. So good intentions, right? My theory is that there are no evil people, only evil ideas. And really, fundamentally, there's one evil idea, and all other evil ideas have at root that one evil idea. And the evil idea is that there are evil people. If you really think about it, all of the violence that you can point your finger at, all of the vitriol, I hesitate to use the word hatred because so many people these days are using that term to describe other people. And there may or may not be hatred there at all. I think it's probably not what they think it is, right? Like Inigo in The Princess Bride, right? I do not think that word means what you think it means, or really, I think your application of that word is inaccurate. So much of the violence throughout history has come as a result of this idea that somebody else is the evil guy. And if I don't use violence, if I don't defend myself against that evil guy, well, then their evil is going to be made manifest. Fear, right? Fear is at the root of the bad things that humans do to one another. So that is my central premise, right? People are good. I'm going to have conversations with people who have opinions. Those opinions may align with mine, they may not. And honestly, I think if any two people ever get together and they agree on everything, at least one of them is not thinking, right? So I'm going to have conversations with people and try to emphasize a few things. One, even though we disagree, because we disagree, right, we must come together and understand ourselves. Two, it's okay to be offended. It's okay to offend, and it's okay to be offended, right? There is a difference between deliberately causing harm to someone and having an opinion that others deem to be offensive. Offense is subjective. What may offend you may not offend me. What may offend me may not offend you. I do not want to harm anyone. I do not want to deliberately hurt anyone, but I do want to be candid about what I think. And that may mean that offense is going to happen. I firmly believe that you have a right to be offended, and so do I. And by offending, we afford each other the opportunity to exercise that right. And if you look at it through the right prism, right, through the right angle, maybe that's a pretty nice thing to do. Right? If you never question your assumptions, you're going to live a pretty boring life. So good intentions is here to embrace our differences, to learn from one another, and to emphasize the fact that even though we're not necessarily all in this together, we're all in this together. I know that sounds silly. What I mean by that is that there are no two sides to anything, right? There's always this talk, and especially here in the US, right? I've had some conversations with some Norwegians who talk about the glory of the 6 to 8 political parties that Norway has, as opposed to the 2 in the US. And they're right. That is an improvement. That is far superior, because there are not two sides to any issue. To think that especially to think that there are two sides that are going to align on every issue, right? You can be on this side on one issue, which means you're going to be on that side on every issue, and you're going to be opposed to those bad guys on the other side. That's fallacious thinking, and I don't buy it. So there aren't two sides. And I think, in any conversation, there is going to be common ground that we can find. So my intention with this podcast is to prove that we can have civil, productive conversations, and that may be a challenge at times. My other intention is to try to bring some unification to humanity, right? Now that is it is a lofty, a pretentious, an ambitious objective. It's perhaps not possible, probably not possible, right? When Bill Gates and Paul Allen in the 1980s said that they were going to put a PC in every home, that was an impossible dream, right? It couldn't happen. But they had that dream and they went forward, and depending on how you measured it, they pretty much accomplished that goal, which is crazy to think about it, right? And it wasn't just them. There were a lot of people involved, and it was, it may have been inevitable, right? The computing revolution was going to happen anyway. But they had a crazy dream to land on the moon, and they did it. And that can happen, right? So when I think about the legacy of nonviolence that we have, the legacy of free speech, which is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, though I have not been exercising my free speech because of my fear of the reaction, right? I think that there are things that I believe that will cause me to be viewed in a light that is less than favorable by a lot of people. And I need to face that fear. So that's another part of what's going on here, is that I'm facing that fear that not only that I'm not going to be liked, but that it's going to go beyond that, that it will be to a level of, call it harassment, call it hatred, call it threats of violence, right? I fear those kinds of things. And so I've kept my mouth shut for a long time. But I think that things are coming to a head. You know, you hear people talking about civil war, right? I've read some articles about that the U.S. is headed toward a civil war. Now, I think that may be hyperbolic. Maybe it's not, right? There is so much brewing, so much hurt, so much fear. I don't know what the future holds, but I think if well-intentioned, thoughtful people can't get together to try to, for one thing, hash out differences. For another, just simply listen, right? I want to have an ability to learn from some people. And if my opinions that are unpopular because they are objectively wrong, I want to jettison those things. So, rather than vitriol towards somebody who thinks something different, maybe a little understanding, maybe a little hand to help, right? Instead of calling somebody a bigot, maybe offer to help with another perspective that might help them to grow. And at the same time, consider maybe they're not really a bigot. Maybe the accusation of bigot is the thing that is bigoted. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Consider the possibility. So the Good Intentions podcast is about the fundamental goodness of humans. I think we're all good at heart. And I think that if we can get past the fear that causes us to put our guard up, I think we can realize that even though I think it's fallacious to say we're all in it together, because I think everybody has their own objectives and needs to be free to pursue those objectives as they say. I'm stumbling over my words here, but this is going to be an unedited podcast. That's one thing I didn't mention, unedited. It's the fear, right, that causes us to put our guard up, causes us to defensively do things that may not be defensive at all, right? So I don't think anybody ever really thinks that they're the aggressor in a situation. Let's try to understand each other. So I think that's it for episode 0. I'm going to flesh out more as I talk to people, right? This podcast is going to be different than what I've done in the past, right? My other podcast, Developer on Fire, which the people who are listening to this podcast, some of them are probably software people like me. I hope that it's not exclusively that. I think this is something that's going to appeal to a much broader audience. This is for all of humanity. This is for people who have that sense, right, that we could be more together, right? That one guy wears a red tie, one guy wears a blue tie. That doesn't mean that they have to be at odds. This is for humans. Okay, so my other podcast is very much not about me, and this isn't necessarily about me either. But that show is about, I'm featuring a guest, and so my role is to bring out their story in a way that serves the user, the listener, I should say. I'm used to saying user because of being a software guy, but I want to serve the listener by bringing out the story of the guest. They are the one being featured. I'm there to facilitate that. This is different, right? This show is about humans having conversations. It is a completely equal footing. And so I'm sharing my opinions. I'm listening to opinions of the guests. My hope is that I'm going to treat them with the utmost of courtesy, that I'm going to give them a full hearing in their opinions, that I'm going to challenge them where I think they need to be challenged. But I've pushed back against the term debate Because when I hear somebody say debates, well, the next question is, well, who won, right? The debates are contests. I don't want to have contests with people. This is a collaboration. We are on the same team here, even though we may differ in opinion. And honestly, if somebody can come on this show and convince me that there's a better way of looking at things than what I've done, then we both win. So I don't want to view these conversations as debates. I want to have participatory growth with other people, right? So this is a shared journey. And another thing, right? I'm a software geek. I've spent a majority of my life thinking that I'm good at machines, not good at humans. And so this is another thing, another fear that I am facing with putting this thing out there is that this is a very human endeavor. I by no means have this all figured out. So if I am coming across as, hey, I've got something to offer you because I'm the guru on the mountain that you can come and sit at my feet and learn wisdom, well, that's not my intent, right? I am here as a fellow traveler. I think I've learned a thing or two over the years. I've read a book or two and have a few things to share. I have a limited perspective, and I think somebody else who has had different experiences is going to look at things differently than me, and I can learn from hearing what they have to say. So this is a collaborative effort, and I hope that I learn from the guests. I hope the guests learn from me, and I hope that the listeners all benefit, and that each and every one of you are going to interact and comment on these shows, both on the goodintentionspodcast.com website as well as the YouTube channel that has a identifier right now for the channel identifier. My understanding is that after I start getting some subscribers, then I can do a custom channel name, and then it'll be an easier thing that I can call out. I do not consider myself a YouTuber, even though these are going to be published on YouTube. I am a podcaster who also publishes content on YouTube so that people can check out video as well. But I consider goodintentionspodcast.com the home for this particular endeavor. So please join me in trying to share humanity with the people around us, right? I hear a word thrown around a lot. The term is empathy. And there are different forms of empathy. I've learned this from Andrea Goulet, who is going to be the first guest on this show. I guess I'll go ahead and reveal that. She is, strong in the force with this concept of empathy, and she pointed out to me. All right, I learned from her in my Developer on Fire interview with her that that there are multiple types of empathy, and that what I have always pictured empathy as being this touchy-feely, this emotional link with people, that you feel what they feel. This thing that I thought was beyond my grasp. Well, that's one type of empathy. But there's also cognitive empathy, where you can reason about somebody else's perspective and try to put yourself in their shoes with your imagination, with your intellect. That I can relate to. That's something that I can do and that I hope to do, and that I think that this podcast is, for one thing, among many others, right, that I've been talking about through this entire conversation. This is not a conversation, this is a monologue. That I've been talking about through this monologue is there are many intents to this thing. And one of those is that I am going to grow my powers of empathy. So these interactions hopefully will serve for that purpose. So please go ahead and subscribe in whatever form you think makes sense, right? There will be, there will be ways on the website that you can subscribe to the RSS feed, use your podcast player, and check out every one of these as you're on the go, right? Driving in your car, walking to your kids to school, as I do. I listen to podcasts on my way to school. You can do that. Or you can sit down and watch these YouTube videos via your Chromecast or your PC or your mobile device, what have you. So, but please go ahead and subscribe. Check this out. Good things are going to happen here. There's going to be some growing of some good feelings, and I think this is going to be the path that while I think it is overly ambitious, overly pretentious to think that I'm going to solve the problem of all that divides us in humanity. I do think I have a contribution to make, not just me, me and other people in collaboration. So let's do this thing together. Thank you for listening to this, and we will just go on from here. Onward, March, Good Intentions Podcast, signing out.